Welcome back. Today we're going to start really getting into the 1970s and talk about some of the issues, some of the things that came up to understand the decade. Obviously, we don't have a ton of time, maybe a week or two to talk about the 70s before our finals next week. So, in the early 1970s, we got to remember what's going on in the country. So, we start with the fact that it's in the early 1970s that America admits defeat in Vietnam, signs a treaty, and pulls their troops out. And within a few months of American troops leaving the country, the North Vietnam come down, conquer, destroy the, the South Vietnamese government, kill lots of people, just destroy a lot of things, do a lot of damage. All right, so America deals with its first major military loss in the early 1970s. Then we have a president resign for doing shady spying on people, right? Using his power to abuse people, lying about it, getting caught on all this, like breaking the trust between the American people and the government, and he goes down in disgrace. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about how the Cold War is going to flare up again. As America's taking a step back, the Soviet Union is going to take a step forward. Right, as America struggles in the early 1970s, the Soviet Union is going to be successful. And America is going to be in this position where the Cold War has kind of flipped sides now, where America is a little bit more on the losing side and the Soviet Union's starting to take good steps forward. And so the early 1970s are not a good start for the United States. I got to mention like this, the civil rights movement sort of stalls in the 70s. There's a lot of progress and things changing in the 60s, and a lot of people in America think, well, we did it. It's over. We succeeded in stopping racism, and obviously that's not true, and the movement sort of runs out of steam. I've been going strong for about 15 years. It starts to slow down. Now, there's still people pushing. I don't want to make it sound like no one's doing it. There's still a lot of people pushing for civil rights and arguing and demanding change, but there isn't as much support for it. All right, so the early 1970s, we see a lot of negativity in the United States. And that's when President Jimmy Carter gets elected in the mid 1970s, and it's going to be his job to kind of bring America back. And today we're going to be focusing on him a lot and talking about what did he do, how successful was he, and our goal today is to compare and contrast what was happening in the late 1970s to what's going on now. And I think about what happened to Carter, where was America at, compare it to Biden today and what's going on in our country today. So we'll start with a quick video of Jimmy Carter. You can pause this one while we watch the video as a class. So one thing that's going to happen in the 1970s that's going to turn a lot of this sort of upside down is going to be in the Middle East. There's going to be a lot of war and conflict, and for the first time in like 2.5 decades, it's not really Cold War related. Now, the Cold War influences it, but it's not about capitalism versus communism. It's about religion and different cultures and power. And there's going to be other groups of people. Now, the U.S. and the Soviet Union are going to be involved in these, but there's going to be a lot of conflict in the Middle East. Similar to what's going on today, right? There's going to be an energy crisis because of the conflict in the Middle East. A lot of these countries aren't going to like the United States, and they're going to hold back their oil. They're going to refuse to trade with us. And there's going to be an energy crisis where the country straight up runs out of gas. We just literally didn't have anything at the gas stations. You'd go up and they'd be like, we don't have anything. Move on. Pumps are closed. And people couldn't fuel their cars. Imagine what that would do to our country today if like gas stations ran out of gas across the country. One, any gas there would be insanely expensive and no one would be able to afford it. People wouldn't go to work, couldn't deliver groceries, couldn't deliver supplies. Right? We really shut down our economy. And that's what happened in the late 70s is they ran out of gas. There's going to be huge economic failures for lots of reasons. Inflation is going to be out of control. Prices are going to rise very quickly, yet at the same time, people are unemployed. Now, if you haven't taken economics, these things should be working in opposite. Right? Inflation and unemployment should usually be going in different directions. It's very rare to see them going together. Right? So if we think about today, we have high inflation but low unemployment, which is more normal. Doesn't mean it's good, but it's a little bit more normal. To have high inflation and high employment, it's really tough. Two major problems to deal with. And America went under what we call a crisis of confidence. All this negativity, we've been going strong for like 2 decades, 3 decades since World War II. America was confident we were the best and we were going to do something great. And in the 70s, that changes where people start thinking, maybe we're not doing things right. Things aren't going to get better. Things are just going to get worse. Maybe we're not as good of a country as we thought. And just a lot of negativity from the average American. The outlook was a little bit darker. Here's some pictures of the energy crisis. They're closed. There's a line of cars trying to get into a gas station. Nobody was driving, so you could go out on the highway and just have a picnic or something because there'd be no cars going by. No one was driving. We'll watch a video on the 1970s. There's another major crisis that's going to happen. It's called the Iranian hostage crisis, where a bunch of Americans are going to get captured and held hostage. And this is going to be a huge deal. And Carter is president. He is supposed to negotiate their release, and he's unable to. He's unable to get the American hostages back. They don't come back until after he's gone as president. Someone else comes in and takes over and negotiates the deal and brings the hostages home. Also in the late 70s, the Soviet Union is going to start expanding. They're going to invade a new country. They're going to invade Afghanistan. Right? And America's going to be put to the test. Right? Here we got communism expanding, spreading. Is America going to step up, send troops to Afghanistan to fight off the Soviet Union? Well, America can't do that. America can't send troops again after what happened in Vietnam. They send money and weapons, but not nearly as much. America's willingness to defend these small countries around the world just isn't there anymore. We're not willing to lose our own lives trying to defend a country. So America's going to send money and weapons to the rebels in Afghanistan who are going to try and fight back against the Soviet Union. And this is actually going to work out for the United States. Kind of crazy. Not sending troops is probably the best idea. Sending money and weapons. Afghanistan turned into an awful war for the Soviet Union, kind of like the Vietnam War for America, right? Where it dragged on for a decade. Loss of life could never really conquer the way they wanted to, and it sort of left the Soviet Union in as bad a position as the United States was a decade earlier. We'll talk about that more next week when we talk about the end of the Soviet Union. America is going to be supporting a man named Osama bin Laden to try and help him fight the Soviet Union. And if you know anything about history, this is the same man who turned around and used his weapons and his influence to attack the United States. He hated the United States just as much as the Soviet Union, but he took money and weapons from the United States to fight off the Soviet Union. Once they were gone, he turned on the United States, and he was the man who designed, orchestrated the September 11th attacks. Here's Afghanistan. You can see where it is on the map. Soviet Union pushing further into Asia. Bad for the United States. Definitely in the late 70s, this was not a good situation. It's not until like the mid 80s that we start to recognize how bad of a situation it is for the Soviet Union, how it kind of worked out for the United States. Here's some pictures of that invasion, the Soviets invading, and then the Afghan rebels who are going to fight back. Watch a video again. All right, so we looked at a lot of different issues about the late 70s. Your goal today is to compare and contrast. How were the late 70s similar to modern day America? How were they different? There's some sentence stems you can choose to use if you'd like, but you need to do all these things. We need to have a topic. We need similarities, why they're important, difference, why they're important, and then a conclusion sentence.